If we talk about one of the deadliest eras in Formula One, the 1980s takes the crown. It was an absolutely bonkers era in terms of safety. Shirtless pit mechanics standing inches from speeding cars, pit crews celebrating by standing on the racetrack, no safety cars and broken down cars left right next to the action. The risks were huge and the crashes were even bigger. So let's dive into some of the most insane and unforgettable F1 crashes from the 1980s to the 1990s. Starting up is the crash of Gilles Villeneuve during the 1982 Belgian Grand Prix at Zandvoort, a moment that shocked the Formula One world to its core. Villeneuve, known for his fearless driving style, was pushing his Ferrari to the limit during the final qualifying session. His teammate, Didier Pironi, had beaten his time by just 0.1 seconds, and Villeneuve was determined to reclaim his position. As he barreled down the track at speeds between 200 and 225 kilometers per hour, he faced Jochen Mass's slower car. Both drivers, unfortunately, made the same move, heading right to avoid each other. Villeneuve's Ferrari collided with the back of Mass's car, launching it over 100. Teams rushed to help, but despite their efforts, Villeneuve passed away that evening from his injuries. Next up is the devastating crash of Riccardo Paletti during the 1982 Canadian Grand Prix at Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, ironically named after the driver who had died just a month earlier. Paletti, a young Italian racer, was only making his second F1 start. At the beginning of the race, disaster occurred when Didier Pironi's Ferrari stalled on the grid. While most drivers managed to avoid the stopped car, Paletti, speeding toward the front at around 180 kilometers per hour, couldn't react fast enough. His car crashed into the back of Pironi's Ferrari with such force that the front of Paletti's Osella was crushed, pinning him against the steering wheel. The situation quickly worsened when the fuel in Paletti's car caught fire, creating a massive explosion. While the fire was quickly put out, Paletti remained trapped inside, unconscious. Despite rapid efforts by medical teams, the rescue was delayed due to the wreckage, and Paletti sadly passed away from his injuries.
Second, Jones, third, Lafitte fourth, and that is Derek Daly and Jean-Pierre Jarier.
Then there's the 1980 Monaco Grand Prix, where Derek Daly's crash added to the already risky reputation of the Monte Carlo track. Monaco's narrow streets and sharp turns are notorious for causing trouble, and Daly's crash at the start of the race was nothing short of dramatic. As the race began, Daly collided with Bruno Giacomelli, sending his car flying through the air and into a group of cars, including those of Jean-Pierre Jarier and Alain Prost. It was a chaotic moment, with cars piling up and pieces of debris scattered across the track. Fortunately, no one was seriously hurt, but the crash completely changed the course of the race. Out of the 24 drivers who started, only 8 finished, making it one of the most chaotic races in Monaco's history.
Absolutely colossal crash at over 200 miles an hour on the Tosa Bend. Amazingly, he got out of the car.
Moving on, let's talk about the crash of Nelson Piquet at the 1987 San Marino Grand Prix. This race took place on May 3rd, 1987 at the iconic Imola circuit, part of the Formula One season. Piquet was driving his Williams FW11B when disaster struck during Friday practice. A tire on his car blew out, causing him to crash hard into the wall at the infamous Tamburello corner. The impact was severe, leaving his car heavily damaged, with half the rear end torn off. Piquet walked away with what he thought was just a sore ankle, but after being taken to the hospital, doctors refused to let him race. Years later, Piquet revealed that he secretly suffered from headaches and double vision for the rest of the 1987 season, even seeking medical treatment without informing his team. The cause of the crash was never confirmed, but Goodyear, the tire supplier, decided to replace all the tires after concerns of tire blistering from other drivers. Piquet's crash wasn't just an isolated incident. It triggered a chain of events that saw teams scrambling to replace tires and prepare for a chaotic race weekend. Up next, let's rewind to 1989, where Philippe Streiff faced a life-changing accident during a pre-season test at the Jacarepagua Circuit in Brazil. While driving for AGS, he lost control of his car at a fast right-hand kink before the hairpin onto the back straight. The crash was violent, causing the car to roll multiple times and tearing off the engine, gearbox, and wheels. Tragically, the roll hoop, a crucial safety feature, failed and Philippe was thrown over the guardrail. The impact broke the top of the chassis and left him with a broken shoulder and 2 fractured vertebrae in his neck, resulting in paralysis and quadriplegia. Concerns arose that his injuries worsened due to the treatment he received immediately after the crash. The marshals righted the car, which caused additional trauma to his head and neck, and they removed his helmet. Felipe was left resting on the grass for about 30 minutes before an ambulance arrived. Although AGS mechanics arrived soon after, they were denied access. But they saw Felipe moving his arms and legs while waiting for proper medical assistance.
Tamburello and Burgers goes straight off into the barrier. A big accident this, at 180 miles an hour, shedding bits of car, and it bursts into flame.
Staying in 1989, one of the most memorable crashes involved Gerhard Berger at the San Marino Grand Prix. During the race, Berger's Ferrari collided with the wall at Tamburello Corner at speeds of nearly 290 kilometers per hour. The crash was brutal, and his car caught fire immediately. Thankfully, the rescue team arrived in just 16 seconds, saving Berger from what could have been a fatal accident. He suffered second-degree burns to his hands and a few broken ribs. The crash wasn't just a wake-up call for Formula One. It led to major changes in fuel tank design and chassis regulations to improve driver safety. Ferrari learned from this crash and quickly made changes to their front wing design, which had failed during the crash. Despite this, Berger's crash was a key moment in pushing Formula One to improve safety measures and protect drivers in high-speed impacts. Next up, we go to 1986, where Elio De Angelis was facing challenges on the track. After a disappointing performance at the Monaco Grand Prix, where he retired early, Elio requested to participate in a testing session at Paul Ricard. On May 14, 1986, at around 11 a.m., tragedy occurred. While driving his Brabham BMW BT55/3 at about 290 kilometers per hour, the rear wing of his car failed, sending him into a horrifying series of flips before crashing upside down, landing approximately 100 yards from the initial impact. The response to the crash was painfully slow, with Elio trapped upside down in the cockpit for nearly 10 minutes as the car began to catch fire. The impact didn't kill him, but he couldn't escape on his own. Due to a lack of marshals at the scene, it took about 30 minutes before a helicopter arrived. Elio suffered from smoke inhalation and passed away 29 hours later at a hospital in Marseille. His injuries from the crash itself were relatively minor, a broken collarbone and some light burns, but the delay in rescue made all the difference. Following his tragic accident, Formula One decided to no longer use the full Paul Ricard circuit, opting for a shorter version to bypass the dangerous curves where Elio crashed. He became the last driver to die in a Formula One car until Roland Ratzenberger met a similar fate in 1994.
Teammate Martin Donnelly had a horrific accident on Friday afternoon.
Now, let's talk about the crash that shook the F1 world. During practice for the 1990 Spanish Grand Prix at the Jerez circuit, Martin Donnelly faced a terrifying moment. While driving at around 260 kilometers per hour, he suffered a suspension failure that caused his car to slam into the wall. The impact was so severe that his Lotus broke apart and the safety cell split open, ejecting Donnelly from the wreckage onto the live track as cars raced by. Donnelly sustained multiple injuries, including brain and lung contusions and severe fractures in both legs, putting him in a life-threatening situation. Medical teams, including the legendary Dr. Sid Watkins, rushed to his aid as he lay unconscious, having swallowed his tongue. He was airlifted to the hospital and placed in a medically induced coma due to the severity of his injuries. Amazingly, after extensive surgeries and rehabilitation, he was able to walk again, but his Formula One career was tragically over by 1993. Now we want to hear from you. Which of these 1980s crashes do you think had the biggest impact on Formula One safety? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more exciting F1 stories. What do you think were the most dangerous years in Formula One? If we need to crown the most dangerous period in Formula One, it would be the race days of the 1970s. During that time, cars had no seatbelts until mid-decade. Cockpits were open and poorly reinforced, and fuel tanks were placed dangerously close to the driver. The barriers on the tracks were often just stacks of tires, and the lack of fireproof suits in the early part of the decade meant even a small crash could turn deadly. Accidents were frequent, and losing control at high speeds often led to tragic outcomes. So let's dive into some of the most insane and unforgettable F1 crashes from 1970 to 1980. First off, the tragic accident of Jochen Rindt at the 1970 Italian Grand Prix in Monza.
Today's laps are part of the driver's normal routine.
Rindt was having an exceptional season, leading the championship and driving one of the most advanced cars of the time, the Lotus 72. During a practice session, a disaster happened when his car suffered a mechanical failure, most likely a breakage in the front suspension or brake shaft. Rindt lost control of the car at around 150 miles per hour on Monza's high-speed straights. The car veered into the barrier, and in a horrifying twist of fate, the guardrail pierced through the chassis, striking Rindt. At the time, he was not wearing a full a safety measure not yet mandatory, which led to even more severe injuries as he was thrown forward during the crash. His fatal throat injuries meant he died on his way to the hospital. Despite his death, he still became the 1970 Formula One world champion, making him the sport's only posthumous title holder. Next up is the devastating accident of Roger Williamson during the 1973 Dutch Grand Prix at Zandvoort,
which was when the drama happened during the 8th lap. Roger Williamson came out of a fast corner, hit the safety rail, overturned.
In what remains one of the darkest moments in Formula One history, Williamson's car suffered a tire failure, causing him to lose control at high speed. His car hit the barriers, flipped, and immediately caught fire. Trapped upside down in the burning wreckage, Williamson's life could have been saved had there been proper safety protocols in place.
The car caught fire. The emergency services took 8 minutes to arrive, an eternity.
Unfortunately, marshals were slow to react, and they lacked the necessary fireproof gear to approach the flames. The sight of fellow driver David Purley, who stopped his own race to frantically try to rescue Williamson, is seared into the memory of F1 fans. Purley tried desperately to flip the car over, even as flames roared around him, but with no help from the marshals and inadequate fire safety measures. Williamson tragically passed away. Another serious accident in the 1970s Formula One season occurred during the 1973 U.S. Grand Prix at Watkins Glen, claiming the life of talented driver Francois Sever. As Severt was practicing for the race, he pushed his car to the limit, trying to find the fastest way around the track. During a high-speed run, he lost control and crashed into the barriers. The force of the impact was immense, and he suffered fatal injuries. This accident shocked the racing world, especially his teammate Jackie Stewart, who was very close to Severt. Stewart was so affected by the loss that he decided to retire from racing right after the incident. The 1976 German Grand Prix at Nürburgring was marked by an even more horrifying event involving Niki Lauda. During the race, Lauda, one of the most iconic drivers in the history of Formula One, lost control of his Ferrari while navigating one of the most challenging and dangerous tracks in the world. He crashed into a barrier, and within moments his car burst into flames. Lauda was trapped inside the burning vehicle, suffering severe burns to his face and lungs. Thankfully, other drivers quickly came to his aid, and he was rescued from the wreckage. Lauda's miraculous survival despite his injuries is a testament to his strength and determination. After spending time in the hospital, he made a remarkable comeback, returning to the track just weeks later. This incident caused the iconic face Niki Lauda is known for, even to this day in history. Then in 1977, the South African Grand Prix at Killarney brought another devastating incident involving Tom Price. During the race, a marshal ran onto the track to retrieve an object, not realizing a car was approaching. In a split second, Price collided with the marshal at high speed, resulting in a catastrophic accident. Both Price and the marshal died instantly, and the shocking nature of the crash left the racing community in mourning. This was a very critical time for Formula One, especially after the tragic accidents that occurred in the 1970s. These events forced everyone involved in motorsport to confront the harsh realities of racing and the dangers that came with it. One of the immediate responses to these tragedies was a renewed focus on car design. Before the 1970s, many cars were built with speed as the top priority, often overlooking crucial safety features. Following the incidents, there was a shift in mindset. Engineers and teams began to realize that protecting the driver was just as important as making the car fast. This led to the development of stronger chassis made from materials like carbon fiber, which provided better protection during crashes. The introduction of crumple zones, which absorbed energy during a collision, became more common. These features were designed to minimize the impact on drivers, significantly increasing their chances of surviving crashes. Safety barriers on tracks also saw major improvements. Prior to these accidents, many racetracks had insufficient barriers, which left drivers vulnerable to serious injuries upon impact. In the wake of the accidents, the FIA, Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile, the governing body for motorsport, implemented stricter regulations for track safety. This included the installation of better barriers, such as Tech Pro and safer barriers, designed to absorb energy and reduce the severity of crashes. Tracks were redesigned to enhance safety, with runoff areas being expanded and improved to give drivers more space to recover from potential mistakes. Another significant change came in the form of improved fire safety measures. Lauda's horrific experience in the flames of his Ferrari highlighted the need for better fire protection. As a result, teams began using fire-resistant materials in car construction, such as Nomex, which is a fire-retardant fabric used in driver suits and car interiors. It also led to the establishment of medical protocols at racetracks. Formula One started to take the health of drivers more seriously, introducing mandatory medical staff and emergency response teams at every race. The presence of ambulances and trauma teams became standard, ensuring that help was readily available in the event of an accident. The FIA also began to require that tracks have proper medical facilities nearby, allowing for quick and effective treatment of injured drivers. Furthermore, the FIA pushed for a comprehensive review of driver training and safety standards. This included the introduction of safety briefings before races and educating drivers about the risks they faced and how to minimize them. The impact of these changes extended beyond just the immediate safety of drivers. The accidents and their aftermath also influenced the culture of racing. The camaraderie among drivers grew stronger as they realized they were all facing similar dangers on the track. There was a collective push for safety that transcended rivalries, with drivers supporting one another and advocating for better practices. This sense of unity led to a more respectful environment in the sport. Thanks to these changes, modern Formula One is much safer. Cars are now built with stronger materials and smarter designs, and tracks feature better barriers to protect drivers. Medical teams are always on standby, ready to help if needed. This shift not only made racing safer, but also created a strong bond among drivers and teams who recognize the need to look out for each other. Now, we want to hear from you. Which crash from the 1970s do you think had the biggest impact on Formula One safety? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more exciting F1 stories.